Hello there, welcome to my channel. You know, reMarkable rarely releases products. They started off with the reMarkable 1. A few years later, they had the reMarkable 2, and that's still on sale. And then a few years later, last year in fact, they released the reMarkable Paper Pro. To our surprise, this year, here in September of 2025, they've announced their fourth product, the reMarkable Paper Pro Move. And we're just going to call that the Move from here on out for simplicity. This is a device that I think a lot of people were surprised about, and it's an interesting device that fills a unique position in the e-ink note-taking space. So in this video, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the competition, do an unboxing, and other first impressions around the hardware and startup experience. All right, well, let's start with looking at some of the specific attributes of the Move. And we're going to start off at the top of the table here, looking at the dimensions, which are measured both in imperial and metric units, as well as the weight of the device. One interesting aspect here is that the weight, and to a lesser degree the dimensions, are almost identical to the Viwoods AI Paper Mini. The weight is almost spot on, and then the Move is just about a little over an inch thinner than the Viwoods device. We'll take a look at both of those devices in comparison and see if that inch helps the Move distinguish itself as a portable device over the Viwoods Mini. In addition to that, you can see that it's using a Gallery 3 screen, 7.3 inch screen, with 20,000 colors represented and a 264 PPI resolution screen. So a couple of things about those. First off, 7.3 inches is the first time we've seen that particular diagonal on an e-ink device, regardless of the technology. Also, this is only the second device to come out that is currently on the market with Gallery 3. There was a third that released a few years ago that's no longer available, but right now only reMarkable produces devices with Gallery 3. Talking about the PPI, the resolution of the Move sits in between the reMarkable Paper Pro from last year, which is at 229, and then the best e-ink devices out there that are in black and white and run 300 PPI. Just continuing on the table, you can see that the battery is around 2,300 milliamp hour battery, and then the storage is 64 gigabytes, which is the same as last year's Paper Pro. Just one word about the battery. It is a little bit on the lighter side relative to other devices that are roughly in the same size class, at least those that have e-ink. But the battery size doesn't actually tell the full story in many cases. It has a lot to do with the software that the device is running on. And historically, reMarkable has good battery life in most of the tests that they go through. I'll be doing tests and we'll see what the actual results are. But there's nothing in particular to be concerned about the fact that it has a slightly smaller battery relative to other devices. The last thing I want to throw in here is I want to talk about some things the Move doesn't have. Because remember, the Move is all about mobility. So I thought it was important to highlight that there is no dust or water resistance, and there's no cellular connectivity either. Both of those things are pretty uncommon in ink devices. The Libra Color, for example, has water resistance. There's a Big Me e-ink device that has cellular connectivity, so it's not unheard of. But for the most part, devices don't have these features. I just wanted to highlight these in particular, again, because of the nature of the Move, and just to make folks aware that there are certain limitations to this device that you might think were there in a mobile device. The last thing I'll point out is that there's no apps on the device. And I think a lot of people, including myself, were kind of hoping that reMarkable would kind of go off-brand and finally include an app, even if it's only the Amazon Kindle app. And the reason why, at least from my perspective, is that Gallery 3, because of that range of 20,000 colors, would be great for comics and going cell by cell, even potentially on this size of a form factor device, but alas, it's not to be. Let's focus our attention then on what is a potential competitor to the Move. And I'm going to start off by displaying the Move itself with a price tag of $499. What's important to understand with this price, and this is true of all the other devices we're going to look at, this is the lowest possible combination of device, folio, and stylus. So that's what that price point represents. In some cases, devices can have a lower price point because you cannot buy the stylus or miss out on the folio. On other cases, those things are bundled in. And even further, in certain cases, that's true with reMarkable and Supernote, you can actually, increase the cost by buying, higher grade folios or better styluses or what have you. So this is just one data point, and we're trying to make it an apples to apples comparison by picking that lowest price point with all three elements of the device included. You can also see the screen type there along with the screen size, and then my notes about what the device is predominantly for. And the Move is clearly predominantly a note-taking device. Yes, there is reading capability. You can read EPUBs, you can read PDFs, but if you look at the launch video that reMarkable did for this device, it was almost a 10-minute video. It's almost exclusively around note-taking. So I don't think there's any question about what this device is trying to do. So given that, let's start looking at some potential competitors, and we'll kind of get a sense of how this might stack up against those. And we'll start with the Boox Palma 2. Now the Boox Palma 2 is almost the inverse of the Move. This is really a dedicated kind of phone-sized e-reader that Boox puts out. It does come in at a lower price point, but it's only black and white, and it has that smaller screen. There is note-taking capability on it. You can download apps where you can type in notes, but there's no stylus input. So again, really very much the inverse of the Move, and I don't think ultimately a competitor. Then there's the next group of devices, and these all are kind of very similar, both in the fact that they have price points that are generally lower than the Move. They all have 7-inch screen sizes. They all use the Kaleido 3 color. Now, a word about that. So Kaleido 3 only represents 4,000 colors, where Gallery 3, as we talked about, has 20,000. But really for note-taking, that's not particularly relevant. I did a video last year looking at Gallery 3 versus Kaleido 3, and my overall conclusion was Kaleido 3 actually is a little bit of a better technology for color e-ink for note-taking. There were advantages for Gallery 3. Gallery 3 was more vivid when you weren't using any front lighting, so that's a plus for that. But Kaleido 3 had smoother behavior in writing, so you draw a line and that's the end of it, no matter what color you draw. That's not true for Gallery 3. Gallery 3 has certain behaviors as you draw certain colors, and we'll take a look and demo that later in this video. But the net of that is I felt that Kaleido 3 was generally the better technology for note-taking. But having said that, all these devices also share the fact that the styluses either aren't very good, or their software isn't good, or isn't good in this particular form factor, such that for each of these devices, as good as they are as e-readers, and they're all actually quite good as e-readers, I particularly like the Libra Color myself, but they're not good for note-taking. That was really kind of a weak point in all these devices. And because we know that reMarkable, we know what the note-taking is going to be like, at least to a certain degree, because it's building off of the reMarkable Paper Pro, I feel pretty confident that these devices also are not going to really compete with the Move. They just don't have a good writing experience that I expect the Move to have. So our last two devices might actually be legitimate competition for the Move. Both of these devices feature lower price points, larger screens, although they only come in black and white. The Viwoods AI Paper Mini is more of a balanced device. It has full access to Google Play, so you can have all sorts of reading apps on that, and it has front lighting, so it's a good reader. And it has a pretty good note-taking function as well. In fact, it's based in large degree off of the reMarkable UI, so their note-taking app is very similar. The Supernote Nomad, on the other hand, is a really note-taking focused device, and it's one of the best note-taking software applications out there for e-ink. That has the Kindle as well, but reading is a little more of a subsidiary for this particular device. It's really mostly about the writing, just like the Move is. The question of whether these devices ultimately compete with the Move will depend on the form factor of the Move itself. So let's go ahead and start to get a sense of what that form factor is, and we're going to do that by diving into the unboxing. Okay, so here it is. Here's some pictures of the sides of the box for anyone who might be interested in that. There is a pull tab here on the side, and we'll be opening that up in just a second. Before we do though, notice that on the bottom it does say Paper Tablet, Marker Plus, and Book Folio. Well, that's kind of interesting because you don't have to go with the Marker Plus. You can go with a regular marker. And you don't have to have a folio. So I guess they have different boxes for the different combinations, which I guess isn't unheard of, but I thought that was a little strange that they didn't go with just a kind of a generic packaging. The packaging will vary based on what configuration that you buy. Kind of interesting, but let's go ahead and get on into this thing. And as we open it up, it has two components. It has the folio and then it has the Move. Let's start here with the folio. All right, here's the folio, and there is this insert that basically just talks about how to attach the device. Not that an insert is needed, but I guess it's there. The folio does have that traditional flap that we've seen with the reMarkable Pro series, where you can secure the stylus if you feel that's a particular concern. But let's put that aside and go ahead and open up the device itself. All right, use the pull tab there. There is the Move, so we'll put that aside for a second. Let's go ahead and put out the insert. So there is the marker. And this is the Plus, so it has an eraser cap at the end. Here is the USB, so that is going to be a C to C. Okay. And then here are the tips, and if I remember correctly, yes, this is going to come in a little case, like so. And you can pull it out like that. And you get 6 extra marker tips in addition to the one already there. This is full of legalese stuff, which I normally ignore, so it's a little quick start guide and so on. We won't be looking at that. And there we are. Ta-da! Let's go ahead and take off this plastic wrap. And there is the device. And there is the back. Interesting texture on the back. Kind of cool. Okay. So here's some stills. You can first see this side of the device, which doesn't have anything on it other than the design of the ridges, which is similar to what we saw with the reMarkable Paper Pro. Your USB-C port is right here. On this side, it's also plain, although there's a break in the design where the stylus attaches, and there's a little slot that shows where the power will connect when the stylus is attached. And on top, you've got your power button right up there. Let's just take the stylus real quick and connect it to the side of the device. You can see it connects really well. You would have to take a bit of force in order to get this off. It's not going to fall off by shaking it, for example. So it's pretty well in there. So you're not always going to need this flap on the case. If we bring this over to the case and stick it in, another solid connection, and then we can close it up. And again, we don't have to use the flap, I don't believe, because the stylus is so well connected to the device. And there is the form factor on one side and on the other. So initially, the hardware is quite nice, has a nice feel to it. Interesting texture that I noted on the back of the device. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of that texture, but it's not bad. It's not going to detract from the device. It's just a little bit of a surprise. Some people might like it, but I think I'm going to prefer holding it in this case. And if we flip over the case like this, you can feel the fabric a little bit on the back end, and that's a nice soft texture there. So that's basically the hardware, and as you'd expect, at least on first impression, and I would imagine the lasting impression, the quality of the hardware is quite good. Okay, so let's do our weigh-in. Now the stated weight of this device is 230 grams, but sometimes the device actually comes in different than what's stated. That's part of the reason why I do these weigh-ins. So let's go ahead and see how close this is to the official specification. 228, almost identical, and there's actually about a 2 gram margin of error on this scale, so that's right on. If we go ahead and add in the leather folio, then the carrying weight of these combined is 348, and if you throw the stylus in there, then we're talking about 366 grams. That's actually a little bit heavier than the Viwoods Mini. So let's take a quick look at this device versus the Viwoods Mini and see how those compare in terms of their form factor. Okay, so here we have these side by side. We've got the Viwoods AI Paper Mini here on the left, and on the right is the new Move. So the height is almost identical. The Move is just a hair taller. The difference is in the width. Remember, the weight of these devices is almost identical. I think the key thing to point out is that if I hold this device, this is the grip that I would need. And it's kind of stretching my hand. It's something I can do. It's not too uncomfortable, but you can feel it a little bit here. With the Move, it's much less of a spread of the finger. See, my thumb is here at a natural angle, and I only have the pinky extended a little bit. Over here, you get a lot more extension on the pinky. Thumb's about the same. So that seems like a small thing, and we'll test this over time, but I think in theory, that's going to make this a much more comfortable device to hold over time in one hand. So you can grip it like this and get a really stable experience. The Viwoods Mini, because it is so wide, you want to grip it on the side like this. And that makes a huge difference in terms of writing on the device, because you want to write more where the screen is stable. And that's here on the left side of the device with this type of grip, a little bit less sure on the right side. But with the Move, you can have a grip that gives you stability across the screen. And this feels like a pretty comfortable hold given its width. So that is definitely an advantage for the Move. And initial impressions are this is going to make a big difference. I really like the Viwoods Mini. It's a great device. And as I said, leading up to this, it's a more balanced device in that it's a fully functional e-reader. But in terms of taking notes on the go, this form factor feels like it's going to be a bit better over time. Okay, just a few more comparisons. Here we have the Supernote Nomad, and it's really similar in form factor to the Viwoods, maybe a touch wider. You do have this nice back on the crystal version of the device, which is pretty cool, but it suffers from the same problem. You really want to naturally hold this device on the left side. So it's fine if you're writing on a table, but if you're writing in mobile, then it's not going to be as comfortable to write on the right side of the screen. This is the Books Go 7. This is the second generation, and you can see it's got the page turning buttons. That's why it helps make it such a nice e-reader. And the diagonal here is 7 inches, which is actually less than the 7.3 here. But again, same thing. The form factor is a much wider device than the Move. And so it's, when you hold it as an e-reader, you're holding it on one side to turn the page buttons. You're not holding it across the entire device. You could do that, but it's just not as comfortable over time. Last comparison, of course, is the reMarkable Paper Pro itself. And here I have it with the standard stylus. That's the one without the eraser. And you can see how the form factors differ. I'll go ahead and line this up so the screens more or less line up. And you can see it covers, gosh, probably 40% of the screen real estate here on the Move compared to the much larger reMarkable Paper Pro. Okay, so now that we're done with our comparisons, let's go ahead and start this thing up and see what that process is like. I'm holding down the power button, and now it's going. And it's going through its startup phase. So we'll see roughly how long it takes to get going on this device. If I remember correctly, there just aren't very many steps in the startup process, so this should be fairly quick. Here we can see our first glimpse of color. We've got a blue line in the middle with this red line off to the side. And it looks like front lighting is on. And here we go. And we're going to need a smartphone or computer to complete the setup. That's fine. Okay. We're going to attach the marker. We could skip this process as noted down here, but we have a marker. So, oops, this is the wrong one. Let's try the actual reMarkable one. Okay, it's charging. You can see the indicator on the side there, and it may already be fully charged. There it is. Let's go on to next. And it's giving an example of the screen refresh. Let's do that again. So there's this little bit of a flash, and this is what does bother some people about this device, and this technology in particular is what I mean, not the Move, but the Gallery 3 technology, is that sometimes it refreshes, it will flash the screen. And that's either it becomes kind of white noise that you get used to when you just don't care about it, or it can be annoying for some people, and your mileage will vary on that front. We're going to go ahead and connect to Wi-Fi, and I'm going to go ahead and put my password in, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, I put my password in. The keyboard was very snappy. It was really nice. And I think that might be snappier than the reMarkable Paper Pro. I think there was some ghosting of previous keys when I typed on the Paper Pro, and here it was much snappier. So that's kind of a nice to see. And then we're going to see every device, almost every device, will actually ask you to update the software when you get it. It's one of the most maddening things about getting a device. This is brand new. It's supposed to have the latest software on it already, but it doesn't. So we're going to go ahead and time it and see how long we're going to have to wait for this process to complete. And I'll see you on the other side. Okay, I went through the process. The latest software is installed. This 2 minutes plus is from the download to the installation. That is all it took to update the device. That's really good. Most of the time when you get new devices and they require an immediate firmware update, that can be 30 minutes. It could even go as high as 45. So 2 minutes is wonderful. You buy a device, you get excited about it, you want to get on in, and the last thing you want to do is then wait half an hour to an hour to be able to start actually using it. So this is a great time. I'm really happy with how quickly this installed. Okay, so now it's asking to pair to myreMarkable.com. So let me go ahead and do that, and then I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so in order to do that last step of the process, I had to go on my computer. I went to myreMarkable.com, and then you go in to pair a device, and they give you a code. Typed it in here, and here we are. I already have a Connect account, but it is asking to activate. You do get a free trial period with Connect when you buy the device. I can't remember the term. I want to say 3 months, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, let's go ahead, and I don't want a passcode, so we'll skip that. Okay. And I'm right-handed. There we go. And that's it. We've now fully set up the device. Now, the latest update is here. I actually updated reMarkable Paper Pro with this as well, and it added a few elements, including handwriting search. So before, you had to basically convert your handwriting in order to make it searchable. That was a step that you had to do on this device. Now, it will go ahead and search for handwriting without having to make that conversion first. So I'll test that, and we'll see how well that works. But that's one of the key features of the new system. Okay, it's already loaded up my files. Let me go ahead and drop down and turn off the front lighting. There we go. So you can see what the screen looks like naturally. And we'll go ahead and turn that back up. And there's the front lighting. Let's see if it has that feature. On the reMarkable Paper Pro, you could actually do a toggle, which would allow you to make the front lighting even brighter. And I believe that was under display. And yes, you can. So if I click on this, see how much brighter that got, but that will have the penalty of reducing the battery. So we'll go ahead and turn that off for now. In fact, we'll go ahead and turn off front lighting altogether. And look at that, we're up and running. That was quite quick, a nice seamless experience. And all these downloaded from the Connect service. That is one of the nice things about that service, is that the syncing on reMarkable devices is really one of the best in the industry. Unfortunately, it does come with a monthly fee, but the quality of that product is quite good, and there's an example of it. So earlier on in the video, I talked about how there's some unusual writing behavior with the Gallery 3 color technology, and I want to demonstrate that now. So currently we're on black, and black is the one color that draws what I would call instantaneously. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line across the screen to basically demonstrate that, and there it is. And you'll notice that as I drew the line, it just drew exactly as I was drawing it. There was nothing, no strange behavior, nothing happened later. We'll do that again. Just drawing a line, very straightforward. But what if we went to a color like red? And red is one that has what I would call significant snaking and rendering. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the line, and then I'll explain what we saw, and then we'll draw another line. So let's go ahead and do that. And there you go. So what you should have noticed is two things happened there. The first thing is what is called snaking. So as I drew the line, it was actually like this black section of the line that was closest to the tip. And after the black section, then we saw the red line. So the snaking occurred as I was writing the line. When I was done writing the line, the snaking of course goes away as soon as I stop drawing. But the line then changed color. That's the rendering piece, snaking and rendering. Let's do that one more time to see that in action. And the red line has more overt snaking and rendering. And you see that also on yellows, on whites, etc. Now the darker colors, like a blue or a green, have much more subtle snaking and rendering. And let's take a look at that. So we'll use green here. We'll just draw a line. See, so the black line, the snaking part, is much smaller than it was with the red line, but still present. And then you still get the rendering. Let's go ahead and do... See a much smaller little black trailing line, and then the render. So that's the unusual behavior that's associated with Gallery 3 screens. The only color, again, that's instantaneous is black. All the other colors have some form of subtle or overt snaking and rendering. And it's just something you have to get used to when working with this type of technology. One of the interesting issues with reMarkable Paper Pro was that for many people, the blacks looked like a dark navy blue, not black. And I'll have to be honest, that's something I never really saw. In fact, I did a survey at one point on Reddit and asked people if they saw dark blue or black. And about 40% of people saw black, and the other 60% or so saw blue. But here, actually, it looks a lot more obvious. So here I'm writing in black on the move. I've got the black marker in between as a reference point, and then I've written black here on the Paper Pro. And I have to say, I see it here. This does look like a much darker navy blue, especially compared to this, which looks like a really good black. So it looks like that particular issue was solved. You'll also notice that the Move has a nice whiter background than the Paper Pro, which is a little bit yellower. And my personal preference, I really like the fact that this has that whiter background. Oops, I accidentally triggered the undo. There we go. We're back. So yeah, I think they've made an improvement here, and that both the screen as well as the trueness of the black color are both positives here for the Move. So one last comparison before we wrap things up, and again I have the Move here on the left and the Paper Pro here on the right. In both cases I have front lighting on, and I've maximized front lighting. So I did that setting to go into the extra front lighting on both and set them to the highest value. And again, that yellow versus white continues. You can definitely see a yellow screen here, and this is much whiter. I wouldn't call it white on its own, but relatively speaking, much whiter than we saw with the Paper Pro, which I think is a really nice look for this device. I wish this Paper Pro was as white as this device appears. Okay, let's go ahead and go into the wrap-up. Okay, so that concludes our first video of the unboxing, a look at the hardware and the setup process, among other things. Hopefully this was a helpful video. This video, of course, focused more on the hardware. The next video in the series focuses almost exclusively on the software, and that will be called the visual tour. So if you're interested in knowing what this device can do, what the features are, I do a really deep dive in that video covering not everything, but pretty close about what the features and function of this device. So if you're kind of interested in this device but aren't quite sure and want to learn more about it, maybe the marking materials are a little skimpy on those types of details, that's the video for you. At the end of that video, you're going to have a really good sense of what the device is and what it's capable of. All right, I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Until then, have a great day.